I like to say I started when I was 5. I've actually been with the current company that I work with now about 7 years, and I've been in our industry, our crazy world, for 25. So, like I said, I started when I was 5.
Yeah, I believe it.
Right.
100%.
Gotta love filters.
Right?
Uh-oh.
Wait, did I say
No,
filters?
you're not
Filters.
filtered. You're actually live. Sheila, the title of this thing is How to Beat the Tax Code. And I put
I
that
still
up there.
have
And I
some
think,
questions though, Ramin. I don't know. Like,
what do you have?
yeah, how long have you been in Scottsdale?
About 8 years, so
Eight.
not very long. So
So you
yeah, yeah.
travel, you commute.
I do. I'm over here in the Bay Area and all of actually North Bay, East Bay, and Bay Area about every couple weeks. So this month
Very
it's been
cool.
every other week.
Luis
Very
is
cool.
asking because he's in Texas himself, and
Yeah,
he's a San Jose person as well.
I commute as well. I grew up, San Jose,
Oh,
and I
wow.
I do everything
Yeah,
from
yeah. So that's oh yeah,
Boston.
you guys don't even have any state tax. So that's why you don't know about the 1031, right? You're like, what
What?
taxes? What are we talking
What?
about here? No, we'll talk about federal, but yeah, you're gonna learn something today.
I love it.
Absolutely.
On that note, what's a 1031 exchange?
Giddy up.
All right. Yeah. You ready to go for it?
We're ready.
Yeah, what is a 1031 exchange?
All right. What is a 1031
Is that like
exchange?
a
Let's
timeshare
dive
type of
in.
transaction?
So, yeah. Everyone's like, what does 1031 stand for? It's the 1031 tax deferred exchange. And it is for taxpayers that own investment property and they want to protect their equity from capital gains. They can do a tax deferred exchange. And now notice that word, it says deferred. This is the deferral of our taxes on our equity. So long as we're selling, there's a couple things that I do want to point out in a 1031. You need to sell investment property and buy investment property again. So this isn't for our primary homeowner, okay? So
Mhm.
if you own your primary home, it doesn't qualify unless say maybe it was mixed use like a duplex and you live in half. So the 1031 exchange will allow a taxpayer to defer their equity when they sell. They buy of equal or greater in value. That's really the goal. Okay, is to sell a property,
Okay.
buy a property again of equal or greater, and they can have 100% tax deferral. Anything less is a partial exchange, exposing them to taxes and potentially up to the extent of gain. So one of the big things with the 1031 is to make sure you sell investment property, buy investment property of like kind. And I think you guys are pretty sure, I'm pretty sure you've heard me talk about like kind before. And like kind is any real estate held for investment. Okay.
I
Okay.
So
see.
what does that mean? Let me give you some examples. Okay. So if you're going to buy like kind, you sell like kind and you're selling a residential property, this doesn't mean you have to go buy residential again. Okay. Like kind means any real property held for investment.
I
Okay.
see. You know what I was
Okay.
thinking? You had to buy, if you owned a single family residence, you had to buy a single family residence.
No, anything held for investment. So you can actually take raw land for a shopping center or a commercial building for single family
Mm.
or single family for multifamily, selling one and buying multiple or vice versa. All right. So yeah, that is really, I'd say the biggest misused term in our industry is not understanding that that like kind gives such a range of ability for taxpayers to transfer to income producing property, maybe some raw land into multifamily, or maybe they're tired of the long-term tenants and they want to buy a vacation home. A vacation home qualifies so long as a taxpayer is renting out that property, holding it for investment for 14 days or more a
Per month.
year. Get
Oh,
this. Yeah.
per
So it's got to
year?
be held per year, 14 days per year. Now, I want to make sure we understand that this tax code, it's so important that because it comes up where it's been said, oh, is this a loophole? No, this isn't a loophole. This is actually a tax strategy, and it's really the deferral of gain. So a taxpayer in the end is going to end up paying their taxes on the in when they sell that property and decide they no longer want to be either a landlord or hold any property. They will eventually recognize that gain in the deferral. So at some point, unless they swap till we drop, that's what we always joke about.
Yeah. So
So
what's
you
the
can keep
advantage?
deferring
What's the
until death, though,
benefits?
right? And you can keep deferring until you die and it passes on to your estate, essentially.
Yes, absolutely. And definitely today, I always want to make sure I say, since we're live streaming, we don't give tax advice, right? We're a qualified intermediary, but definitely there's some estate planning tools that taxpayer will use and in using this 1031. Okay. And I missed the second question. What was the question?
It wasn't a question. It was just a comment, and I forgot because ADHD.
Must not have been important. That's it. All right. So in this 1031 exchange, making sure that they know that they can buy investment property again, right? We talked about vacation homes qualifying, making sure they're following the limit of use as well as the requirements of holding it for investment, even on the short term, like the B&B market. Okay. Planning it, like we said, about swapping till you drop, kind of keep that money in your pocket instead of paying taxes on it. And there are some restrictions of usage, right? Can't be a primary home.
Okay.
And they have to make sure they're doing this exchange and following a strict little timeline. All right. Because everyone goes, well, what if I sold today? Can I buy again in 2 years, 3 years? Next year? What are we looking at here? So there is a timeline that is required in an exchange that states that so long as a taxpayer set up that exchange within and before close of escrow, they can follow the safe harbor rules, and they have a 180-day exchange period.
Wow.
Okay, that's a 180-day exchange period, but within that, there's a 45-day window in which a taxpayer must identify replacement property by the 45th calendar day by midnight.
Woo,
Got it.
talk
Okay.
about pressure.
I know,
That's
right?
not a
These are the
long time.
rules. It's not. And so when we talk about this as like being, is it a loophole? Is it a hack? It's a strategy that taxpayers can take advantage of it and in their daily ownership of investment property, but they have to follow these rules, right? So
Right.
there's this supposed loophole is not one which we're trying to explain to everyone that eventually one day someone's going to sell, right? The majority of them do end up selling and paying taxes on it. But yep, that little timeline, it's going to require 180 days with 45 calendar days to identify property, and there's no extensions on that unless there's a natural declared disaster.
Mm.
And there's actually a question in the chat. It says, how long do we have to do that? So you just answered that question pretty much. But there's also, the clock doesn't start ticking until something happens, right?
Yeah, until the day of close. So I'm going to answer Enrique's question there. Yeah, I want to say that again. So yeah, because that's so important to know. You do only have 45 calendar days to identify replacement property, and that time, and then you have to buy something within that 180 window. Okay, and that 45 days doesn't start over again. So that's really one where a lot of people have questions on how can we make this happen, right? It is tight.
Right. So what are the benefits? Like, so you said money in my
And that's what
pocket.
you asked.
What's that?
Yeah. What are the benefits? Well, the benefits are you're not paying taxes due to the state and the federal. You, remember, my friend, living in Texas, don't know what that word state tax is, right? Nevada, Texas, Tennessee, Florida, right? But the rest
Right.
of us over here on the West, except Nevada, that we do have state taxes and federal taxes. The benefits are you're able to take those dollars that would have otherwise been spent on taxes and able to use it into wealth growing for your own family, right? And that it's definitely that advantage there of not paying those taxes immediately will allow you to continue to grow your own portfolio, your own real estate portfolio.
So at the end of the life cycle, I'm going to say life cycle, right? When we go to the next world, that's when everything needs to get paid, or we defer it further through inheritance.
Through your estate.
Yeah, and that's definitely where we always say, as a qualified intermediary, right? We don't act as like an agent representative. We always tell them, make sure you're bringing in your CPAs involved in this. This is such an area where a lot of taxpayers try to do this on their own and not realizing that, yes, if you're estate planning and you're wanting to make sure and find a way to defer, right? Swap to a drop, like I joked earlier. Never do this. I'm going to tell all of those that you listening in, do not rely on your own knowledge. Don't just rely on a qualified intermediary like ourselves, because we can't act as your tax professional. You've got to make sure that you're making sure everything is done, because in the event of an audit and you do something wrong, okay, we're not there to stand behind you on this. You need to have a tax professional always do this. So that's one of the biggest and first questions that we always ask. Do you have a CPA? Because we can tell you the rules, right? But we can't tell you the any tax advice.
Yeah, you can't. So let's say I own a single family residence, right? And it's an investment, and I decide to an opportunity to buy 5 condos comes up, and I can do it if I sell that house. Take all those proceeds, bam. Now I got 5. The rental cash flow, it's amazing. Can I do that?
Absolutely. So you can buy multiple. You have to be careful with how many. There are some rules, which I'm going to save you guys. We're going to do this on our next time we get together. But there are some rules with how many a taxpayer can identify. But so they have to be careful with not over-identifying, not just blindly putting a list together and saying, I'm going to buy one of these in this whole entire neighborhood. So there are some rules. But if they are to do it correctly, timing it correctly, and do want to acquire multiple properties, there is a way to do that. And yes, you can absolutely diversify and sell one and buy multiple.
Wow.
And then,
So this
Sheila, a lot of people don't get the whole thing. You can trade a house for a shopping center or for some land as well. Correct?
Yes. Yeah. Let's go back over that like kind for those that might be jumping into this listening in a little late. Like kind means any real property held for investment. Okay. So really making sure that you're aware that you don't have to sell residential. It doesn't mean say make and model, right? It means held for investment. I see Mark's giving me a shout out. Mark.
Shout out from Mark.
Good to
Wow.
see you. I'll see you soon. Yes. All right. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Right. And then Sheila, one
So,
thing
yeah.
before we leave here, but you mentioned something last time we talked. We were at BRG, and I think 14 days. What's the 14-day thing? So that's probably not your 1031 stuff, but I think that's what is that? Something that happens on tax availability. You can rent your house out for 14 days without paying taxes on it, right?
Oh, you're talking about the Augusta. Yeah, that's Jeff. There's an Augusta rule that allows that. I'll defer that to CPA. But yeah, there's some rules in the primary homes with some 14-day that was created. There is a 14-day rule, I can tell you, under the safe harbor of the 1031 that allows a taxpayer to hold investment property and rent it out for only 14 days. Now, they can't live in it the rest of the time. Okay, so being held for investment on the 14-day rule with the 1031 does allow a property to be considered that investment as long as they do have and are collecting fair market rent over a 24-month period at 14 days per year. So 2 different tax rules there, but I know what you're talking about with the primary home on that one.
That's interesting. Okay, and back to the 1031 stuff. So can you give us some really deep, dark secret of the 1031?
I can. Okay. So this tax code is very yes or no, right? You need to make sure you're following the rules and holding it for investment. I can also tell you one of the deep dark secrets, it's not a regulated industry. So a lot of taxpayers that are out there, you have to be careful in understanding who's holding your funds, how are they protected. Okay, in the event that the company mismanages it and didn't mean, to do so, you really have to make sure that you're going with a reputable company that has that insurance to protect those funds. And in doing that is just making sure you have that added security. So definitely watch out for that. I tell you taxpayers, perform your own due diligence, get your tax professionals involved, find a good qualified intermediary that can answer your questions, and we can really make this process smooth.
Okay. And actually, Mark is also asking, what happens after the 14 days?
Oh, are you going back to that vacation homes that qualify? Okay, so Mark's asking about, yes. So if you want a property, and this is the difference, a second home is considered typically a property that is held for personal use, never rented, right? Maybe families living in it rent-free or discounted rent. Okay, there's the 14-day rule that states that a property held for investment, if it's rented for 14 days, the taxpayer can't go stay in it the remainder of the time. The taxpayer's limited use must be of holding that property and renting it out and staying in the property no more than 14 days. So they're going to rent it for 14 and then they're going to stay in it for only 14. That's what the safe harbor rules state. Or they can rent it out as much as they want. Let's say they maybe rent it out for 300 days or 200 days. They can declare 10% of all the days that they rented out as personal use. So maybe you have a property that you're renting out on the, the B&B market, the short-term rental for 200 days a year, you can have 20 days of personal use. So you do have to be careful with that in making sure that it doesn't, turn into a strict snowbird home where you're staying into 6 months a year and renting it 6 months. That would be considered a second home. Personal use,
kind
too
of
much
like a
personal use
vacation home, right? So
versus second home.
right. So how do you, I guess the basic steps to completing one of these 1031 exchanges, what's the first step?
That's the question of the day. Make sure you get with a qualified intermediary early on. I always tell everyone, if you can have a qualified intermediary by your side while you're doing, as a taxpayer, perform your due diligence, right? You're going to go, what could I sell this property for? What are the comps in the area? Getting with a real estate professional to help to decide that. Then getting a qualified intermediary, such as myself, involved early on. That's going to allow us to make sure we're reviewing everything, the title information, the contracts. We make sure that the exchange agreement and assignment is set up in advance prior to closing, and then the funds will go into the exchange account. They can't go into the hot little hands of the taxpayer. Okay, it does need to go into an exchange account where the timeline starts. Okay, so setting up the exchange early on, not waiting till the day of close, because that is the biggest mistake I see people make.
Oh, I was just going to ask you, what's like one of the
What's the biggest?
recent mistakes that you've seen, like that over the top, like disaster type?
Yeah, I see a lot of people go, I meant to set it up, I forgot, it closed last Friday. I haven't even picked up the check from the title company yet. Does this still qualify for an exchange? The
Oh,
exchange has
no.
got to be set up in advance, okay? Basically, the
way.
code states that the taxpayer has got to, before the burden of the responsibility transfers from, say, the seller to the buyer, the exchange has got to be set up. And that is that's probably, I'd say, the biggest mistake, is waiting until the end and not being aware of that.
Sheila, in terms of probably the best advice is get your team in place, right? Get your team of realtors, people that are going to help you, intermediaries, legal attorneys, whatever it is, CPAs, and your loan guys too. Get them all lined up and team together and work in a concerted effort towards this final goal of deferring your taxes.
That's hundreds of
Yes.
thousands, right? That can be
Potentially, absolutely. And I've got to give loanDepot a big shout out too, just to make sure you guys are aware, not all lenders understand the 1031 exchange, making sure you're going with somebody that does and realizes, there is that equal or greater concept, guys. Don't forget, to protect your equity, you want to buy equal or greater. What does that mean? If you've got debt on the property you're selling, you're going to have to figure out what you're going to bring in cash on that new property you're buying, or are you going to get a loan? So I want to make sure to give you guys a shout out too. That get with your partners that understand the 1031 exchange. We can make this a real seamless experience.
Thanks for the
cool.
nudge. Appreciate it. Hey, one more thing. Last time you got me with, California follows you around. No other state, well, 2 other states follow you. New York and I think Texas or Florida, they follow you around too. So can you talk about that?
So there are 4 clawback states that right now it's California, Oregon, Montana, and Massachusetts. And if you're selling in those states, and we're talking because we're all here in California, right? The 3 of us. I'm sorry. We've got Texas here too, but all right. So in discussing California, since that's a lot of our listeners likely listening in here, California has a clawback provision that you have to be aware of. That you make sure you're doing your annual filing every year, letting California know if you take that property from California to Arizona or Texas or somewhere else. California does require this annual reporting that you still own that property out of state. So again, this is where I have to say it over and over.
I love it.
Really make sure I point out, do not try to do this on your own, guys. And taxpayers, really make sure that you've got you're hiring good counsel or a good tax professional to go alongside of all of us that you see in this room right now. Okay. Do not rely solely on your qualified intermediary. We cannot act as your tax advisors. Okay. So definitely making sure you are aware of all the California or other state provisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of sneaky the way California does that. So even if you buy a property in Florida now, you got to tell California about that property. And when does California stop tracking you? After you sell the property you deferred in Florida, let's say?
Yeah, if you sell that property and you're recognizing gain, then yes, then California can say, okay, here's what we feel is due back. And that is, again, something definitely we've got to, but it'd be fun is to have the franchise tax board on here with us for sure.
I would love to do that. Okay, next,
Yeah.
are you in on that one? You gonna get on the call with if I get the franchise tax board on?
I would
here?
love to, yeah. I'll see what I could do to make sure I'm here so I can pick their brain too.
Oh,
Like,
that's
how
gonna
you
be
guys
an
not doing
hour.
this? Tell us some insider trading tips, right? How can we get away with this?
I love it. The
So that's
dark
great.
secret.
When you pay taxes for the California thing, is they follow you around. So let's say I sold my property in Florida, and now I pay my taxes that were due
He paid his taxes. He's
on the
good.
capital gains. Do I have to
Oh, there
pay
you go.
the IRS as well, or the property?
When you sell on that final sale, yeah, the taxes are going to be due, the capital gains at the current year, or whatever that is, right? If it changes or if it stays the same, you're going to have to pay taxes all the way back to the first property you own. So there's definitely some taxes, federal, state, depreciation, all of that has to be considered.
Dang. But that's a good problem to have. If you're paying that much in taxes, that's because you're making a lot.
Listen, I'll have to say this and definitely end on this note is this is a way to wealth build, guys, and all of you listening in, right? This is a opportunity that's given to us that allows us to defer that capital gain and continue growing. Use it as a wealth building, right? If you're not ready, I myself have been involved in exchanges and also sold property where I've not wanted to exchange because I didn't want to buy the equal or greater concept. So it's one of those things where it's not for everyone. I'm definitely a taxpayer that has and will have to for a property I just recently sold. I will have to pay capital gains on that. And so it's one of those things though, guys, you can continue to wealth build, be sure that you're knowing the tools and getting us involved. And I really hope to be a resource for all of you guys in the future.
Yep. And you can get a hold of Sheila right there in the ticker below your screen, and just hit her up with an email. She's always available. And what I love about you, Sheila, is you love the phone. So you'd rather get a phone call than a text message or an email. Yep.
I do. Can you imagine me having to only reply and rely on email? It's really hard. This is a lot of information where a 10-minute conversation can get a lot answered. So I do say, pick up the phone, give me a call, and we can go through it really, really quickly. But yes, my email address is on the screen. I can see it kind of shooting before my eyes, but I actually prefer phone. My kids think I'm crazy, but it's definitely the best way to get things done these days.
Absolutely.
I love it. I know Sheila needs to catch a flight, so
absolutely. Let's get out of here.
Let's go ahead and wrap it up.
Sheila, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I definitely want to get you back with the FTB, Franchise Tax Board, and maybe like an IRS agent or something like that. That'd be great. It'd be like the ultimate conversation. Get the whole gang in.
Oh, right. Wouldn't it be?
Talk about dark secrets.
Okay, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Right. Thank you. Sheila,
Bye,
thanks so much for joining us. Lou, I'll catch you later, buddy.
All right. I'll see you guys.
All right. Adios, guys. Catch us. Don't forget, tomorrow is VA stuff, right?
VA, yes.
That's
VA
right. All about
101.
the VA.
We're going to talk about
Friday. We've got
forgettable
Jared
eligibility.
Marlin coming on. So catch Jared Marlin. We're going to talk about
Capital markets. Yes, sir.
Wyoming.
Yes, sir.
Giddy up.